Ben, good morning. Nice to have you here.
Great to be with you, Pat. Great to be with you, Greg. I'm excited to be with Up North News this morning because I was just up north. I was traveling all through every corner of Wisconsin, and I know folks across our state are listening right now, but we are 1 year out from a giant election, and voters in every square inch of this state are going to have enormous power over this next year to shape the future of American democracy. So I'm very excited to be with you this morning.
We were talking to the ladies from Motherhood for Good yesterday about their group getting people energized and organized with 1 year to go, and they of course told us the reasons why busy parents should care, why they should be engaged. But it's not just them. I mean, it's everywhere. And look, it could be a function of many things, Trump or Biden or the economy or whatever. But let me ask you about it. Why in years past, people had said, oh, 1 year to go to the election, I don't want to hear about that yet. Why are so many people saying, yeah, 1 year to go, fire up, let's go? What is it about it?
I think in Wisconsin, maybe more than other places, we vividly understand that the fundamental freedoms that should be the birthright of every American, that should be a guarantee for anyone who's a citizen here, those freedoms are under attack, and we could lose them if we don't organize and fight for them. And when you think about what's happened in Wisconsin this year, this spring we had a Supreme Court election where the Republican candidate, the Republican-backed candidate, officially nonpartisan race, had been involved in the plot to try to overturn the 2020 election and was a giant proponent of the statewide total abortion ban that was passed in 1849. And Wisconsinites rejected Dan Kelly and elected Janet Protasiewicz. And then Republicans in the state legislature this fall decided that they would try to stop her from doing her job by threatening to impeach her if she didn't recuse herself, refuse to actually do her job and consider the cases before her. And so we first had to win an election, and then we had to stop Republicans from overturning and nullifying the election. And the grassroots pressure stopped them from doing that. But I think it made vivid for all of us across our state that if you want the freedom to choose your own leaders instead of having leaders who choose themselves, you need to be on all the time. And so with 1 year out, as we look at the fight for the House and Senate majorities and the White House and the possibility of working for a state legislative majority under new maps, which the Supreme Court might deliver, that's a very, very significant both responsibility, but also opportunity for Wisconsinites to make a change for the better. Here in Wisconsin, you just can't ignore it because it is in your face every day.
The abortion issue, especially since the Dobbs decision, of course, has been a motivating factor. It will continue to be. That's a fairly easy prediction to make. But I'm going to nitpick just a bit with some of the coverage of it, something I heard on one of the cable channels this morning, as they were talking about, midterms and President Biden's popularity numbers. And this particular person said, excuse me, this cable commentator said, Democrats hope the abortion issue continues to motivate voters. And that really hit me the wrong way, that Democrats aren't hoping the abortion issue hits with voters. Democrats are fighting to protect fundamental rights, and that has nothing to do with hoping for voter turnout. What's your own sense of framing the issue of women's health care rights to voters, especially over the next year in Wisconsin?
I share your frustration with the idea that a lot of folks in the media kind of describe this as, a political wedge issue. This is a fundamental freedom that has been ripped away from half the population. And I just want to say for men too, if you're most abortions in this country are sought by women who've already had kids. Families everywhere need access to reproductive care, especially folks who have high-risk pregnancies. The knowing that you will be safe if something goes terribly wrong, that's the kind of thing that allows you to sleep more soundly at night. It's so basic and fundamental. And I wish that this issue weren't on the table, because I wish that everyone had the freedoms that everyone should be guaranteed and protected by our Constitution. But the reality is that those freedoms are under attack. We have a House Speaker in the United States House of Representatives who's advocated for a national abortion ban. And until we make sure that people like him don't have the power to put a ban like that in place, this is going to be an enormous live issue. If we could go back to the world where we're arguing about what the top marginal tax bracket should be, that'd be great from my perspective. Republicans want tax cuts for the rich. Progressives want tax cuts for the middle class. They want to make sure the rich pay their fair share. That's the kind of debate that, politics, of course, is supposed to be about. But the idea that some people should be less than, that they should not have the freedom to make their own decisions about their own bodies, that is something that should be in the dustbin of history, not a present day debate in American politics.
It is a fundamental issue that is top of mind for many families, as are many economic issues, and we're going to come back to those in a second. Most people aren't into the weeds of politics, and people will say, Pat, why are you going to talk about process? You'll understand why as we go there. Between abusing the impeachment process and abusing the nominating process so that Republicans could fire Governor Evers' appointees, abusing the rules process to block UW pay raises, the constant attack on voting rights, and the efforts to nullify an election or weaken or eliminate the Wisconsin Elections Commission. To me, Ben, just reinforces something Governor Evers said at the end of last year, that you're facing a Republican Party that is downright hostile to democracy, something I didn't think we'd have to deal with in our time. But do you even try to convey those things, or is that simply insiders like me and voters really just want you to focus on what's on the kitchen table?
Well, the conventional wisdom in politics is that process always loses. And I think in general, people want to know, is government going to look out for them, or is it going to be attacking them? Which politician actually has their back and understands them? But there's a line. And when you're trying to overturn elections and you're trying to deprive people of their fundamental right to vote, and you're trying to smash the basic constitution of our society, it does become a voting issue. And we've seen that over and over in our state. We saw that in 2022 in the governor's race, the attorney general's race. We saw it in the Supreme Court race. We saw it in the uprising against the impeachment threat this fall. And if you look at polling in Wisconsin, there's a real gap between how people perceive Donald Trump and Joe Biden when it comes to the issue of democracy. I think this is a live issue in Wisconsin. And I think it's because it's connected so viscerally and clearly to other things that people want, like abortion. Republicans, the only way they think that they can get away with ripping away reproductive freedom from half the population is if they think that democracy is broken enough that the public can't restore that freedom by voting them out of office. So these things are in a sense, part of the same big fight. And we are going to fight on all those fronts going forward. And we know that Republicans in this state, the kind of MAGA wing of the GOP and Republican leaders like Robin Vos, they are not just willing, but eager to trample our democracy if it can give themselves more power. That's not the way it's supposed to work, and we're got to stop them.
I, of course, have been adamant about people not taking Senator Tammy Baldwin's reelection for granted because, frankly, nobody knew who Ron Johnson was until he showed up at the Republican State Convention, 5 months before the 2010 election. Do you have concerns, though, that until there's an actual name and a face with big Republican support behind them, that people will say, Tammy doesn't need my help?
I'm so glad that you're advocating for keeping an eye on this, because the GOP candidates, there's two mega wealthy Republicans in the mold of Ron Johnson, but wealthier, frankly. They're following Ron Johnson's exact playbook, not announcing the year before the election, keeping their resources close to the chest, and avoiding public scrutiny. You have a guy like Eric Hovde, who's a California bank owner. He was rated one of Orange County, California's most influential citizens 2 years in a row. But he's talking about moving back to Wisconsin and trying to buy himself a Senate seat. So we have started, and we need to keep the pressure on. That race cannot be overlooked, and it's critical to the U.S. Senate majority in 2024.
We've talked a few times here about issue one in Ohio and whether voters today will protect the fundamental right to abortion. But we also know there are big elections in Kentucky, Virginia, and elsewhere. Obviously, you watch those as a state party chair. What are you expecting to see, or how are you going to interpret the results, both good or bad, or do you have good feelings about the outcomes on some of these races already?
So I think tonight we're going to get a sense of whether the split screen in American politics we've seen all year, and frankly the last several years, will continue. And by that I mean there's poll after poll that says that people are disengaged, that people are fed up, that they hate both parties, and they're sick of all the candidates, and voter turnout will be low, and Trump has an edge in 2024 because of that disgust. But then when people actually go to the ballot box, over and over, they overperform for Democrats. More people turn out than were expected. More people vote for the Democratic or the progressive position than the pundits thought was possible, even more than the polls thought. And, there have been times like 2020 and 2016 when the polls inaccurately thought that Trump was doomed and said that he was going to lose in a landslide, and it was incredibly close, and he won in 2016. Well, in the last year, the shoe's been on the other foot. And the big question is tonight, will this be a doom and gloom night, which is what you'd expect if all you do is read the national polling? Or will tonight be a night when Ohioans put their foot down for reproductive freedom, when voters in Virginia say no to Glenn Youngkin and the extremists in their part in the Republican Party in that state, and win Democratic majorities in both chambers of the state legislature, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court race, the Kentucky governor's race, the Mississippi governor's race, even that's where you'd expect a Republican landslide. That might not happen tonight when the polls close. And I will be keeping an eye on that to really gauge what is the fire in the belly that the Democrats are feeling across the country. And we will fold that directly into our work here in Wisconsin.
Yeah, it was Joe Zepecki last week that was telling us, keep your eye on Mississippi and this second cousin of Elvis. This might be something to watch. Win or lose, strong showing by him. So I think the last thing I want to hit has nothing to do with Republican politicians. Well, a little bit, but mostly our friends and neighbors who tend to vote Republican, who consider themselves conservative. And the whole notion of whether they feel politically homeless right now because they see what Trump has done, they saw January 6th and everything like that. And the ones that say, well, but that's still where my base values are, so I'm going to vote Republican anyway. What is the message that you deliver to everyday Wisconsinites who feel a little disconnected from the Republican Party they used to know?
Well, at this point, the Democratic Party is the big tent party. There are conservative-leaning Democrats, very progressive Democrats, centrists, everywhere in between. And the Republican Party has become the party of MAGA extremism. And I think there are a lot of people who are kind of traditional Republicans who still find themselves casting ballots for Republicans, holding their nose in many cases, trying to ignore what the people who lead their party are trying to do in their name. And my hope, my invitation to folks is to take a good look over this next year. This weekend, we had 425 door-to-door canvases across Wisconsin where Democrats were knocking on doors, not of strong Democrats, but of people who may have voted Republican in the past, people who may be undecided, to have exactly this conversation, to ask people, what are the issues that actually motivate them the most? What do they care the most about? And on those issues, where does each party stand? Where does each party stand on whether you should cut Social Security and Medicare? Where does each party stand on the idea of democracy? Where does each party stand on freedom, which used to be a value that the Republican Party wrapped itself in? Now the Republican Party is banning books across the country and banning abortion and trying to take away basic freedoms that people count on. The party has changed. The Republican Party has changed. And at the Democratic Party, we want to welcome people who want to de-radicalize the GOP. Maybe you just vote Democratic for an election or two to teach the MAGA wing of the GOP that they should not be steering their party off a cliff. Let's try to get the Republican Party back to normal so we can have responsible parties debating the issues that matter in people's lives without questioning the very idea that America should be the home of the free.
Yeah, talking to some neighbor friends recently, we just want to go back to having those kinds of debates. And you can't do that when you've got, extremists pulling a party toward the very end of democracy, sometimes in their behavior. Ben Wikler, chair of the State Democratic Party, thank you so much for coming in and setting the stage for what's going to be quite a 2024. And we'll be talking in the weeks and months ahead.
So much. Thank you so much, Pat. And
All
thanks
right,
to all your listeners.
Thank you, Ben. Have a great day.